it's pretty clear that the conflict zones in the world are heating up, and the threat of an ultimate global thermonuclear war is now out there and being spoken directly about by governments, as well as hysterical commentators who are finally getting the picture that the decision has already been made, and the various theaters of war in the different regions of the world are all accelerating toward the point of no return. And so for yogis, we also need to reach a point of no return. But it must be no return to the ego, no return to the illusion, no return to the wheel of life and death, no return to subjection to the bondage of the dark force of the other that keeps the ego consciousness in a stunted level of internal development and self-realization. So the ancient sages have all known that we would reach this point, the omega point, to use a term by a modern scientific philosopher, Teilhard de Chardin. But it's not really the omega in the sense that it's the end of the real. It's only the end of the ignorance of the ego. So that with the return of knowledge, of truth, comes the return of the capacity to dream a world of beauty and goodness and harmony and freedom. And we are now in this state when all of that is lost. So the ancient model of the world cycle, which is also, by the way, the symbol of the swastika, is that in which the world cycle is divided into 4 seasons, just as the yearly cycle, and at a more fractal level, the daily cycle. And in the golden age, or Sat Yuga, the energy is all that of emanation and creation. And then it becomes that of expansion and sustenance in the Silver Age. And then the power of creation, it can no longer be sustained at a certain point, and it is lost. And the Copper Age, I would say, can be characterized by attempted recovery of what was lost, which is that power of creative intelligence to sustain the world. And then in the final phase, self and other destruction. In the Copper Age, there is still a battle. It's called Dwapar, two powers. They're really the powers of light and dark, or the upper death drive and the lower. But when we come to the winter of time, to the Kali Yuga, the lower death drive gains dominance and eventually snuffs out the last embers of the light. And the world as a macro-morphogenic field becomes vibrationally attuned to the nihilistic intention and attitude and feeling. Tamasic vibrations, depressive, anxious, hopeless, and all at the same time angry and retaliatory, vengeful, envious, demanding, etc. But for the most part, the weakness of the ego and self-hatred underlies its power impulse as well as its self-sabotaging impulse. Because of the self-hatred and the hatred of the other that caused it to feel the way it does, there's a hatred of the world and a subliminal, subconscious, although becoming ever more conscious, lower death drive demand for annihilation of a cold, cruel world in which there is no love. And why? Because no one is emanating that love or light any longer. They're in a state of taking, of contracting, of neediness, not of emanation, of joy, but of a fear of life, and that overwhelms the fear of death and makes death seem to be a respite from one's agony, one's suffering. And so because the ego is in such enslavement to the other, it cannot any longer take the upper death drive. It has received an irrevocable command not to grow, to remain the child psychologically, never to break through that rite of passage into adulthood that can take responsibility for the sustenance of the world, but only wants to consume and receive without earning. And so we have a capitalist system that has become monopolistic, governed by the most power-hungry and psychopathic to gain monopoly over all of the productive facilities and literally enslave the masses, but no longer even needing them or wanting them because of the exhaustion of Western civilization that has lost all of its creative power. All of the productive energies have gone into industries of destruction, of creating weapons of mass destruction and totalitarian control. And that death drive has resulted in the perpetration of mass murder disguised as a health industry trying to protect your life. And because the ego has so much fear of death as well as of life, it's willing to give in, and it cannot think clearly enough to see what is happening. And so there is a subconscious desire for death within every ego today. And the only hope of escaping the clutches of those self-sabotaging energies that will come out either somatically in terms of disease, illness, and mental disorders, the only way of escaping is the upper death drive through surrender of one's willpower, one's heart, one's mind to the source of consciousness. If you stay with the ego narrative, you'll find out that narrative is causing you to make very bad decisions that are producing situations of self and other defeat. It's It's the wanting both to be destroyed. That is the intention of the ego. And therefore, all organizations are being sabotaged from within. They don't need external enemies. And that self-sabotage is responsible for the destruction of every social order and institution within a larger social order.